Thomas Nagel makes an attempt to examine the concept of possession of sexual perversion present among human beings. He starts out by telling the reader that if sexual perversion is even viable, that there must be general conditions met to consider such an act. He narrows down these conditions to a total of 3. 1. He claims basically that if there are sexual perversions, they must be either sexual desires or sexual practices that are in one way or another unnatural, being the main problem of controversy. 2. Certain practices be considered sexual perversions if there be shoe fetishism, bestiality, or sadism. And 3. Unnatural sexual inclinations will exist if there is sexual perversion and not such sexual inclination from unnatural sexual practices, but for other reasons. Nagel discusses also how sexual perversions has nothing to do with the relation between sex and reproduction, therefore stating that contraception and abortion, although going against natural reproduction, are not sexual perversions. Nagel also declares that even though animals and plants possess the ability to reproduce, sexual perversion is not applied because the concept is that of psychological and not physiological interest. To better explain his stance on sexual perversion, Nagel uses the connection between sexual desire and hunger to do so. This being made possible due to the fact that hunger and sexual desire both serve a biological function and play significant roles in the inner lives of humans. For example, Nagel declares that someone's appetite not be considered perverted if he or she chose to eat, say, paper or sand, but rather considered odd. What would be considered perverted of someone's appetite would be if someone chose to eat images of food when hungry or fill their hunger with stealing, which could be considered as gastronomical fetishism. What also could be considered a perversion of an appetite would be one's restriction on the desire to eat, because it would be going against the natural way of hunger. Nagel makes a point to clarify that if sexual perversions can be imagined of an appetite, then sexual perversion should be an understandable concept to grasp in human beings. In order to fully understand sexual perversion, one must capture the relation that exists between persons. Sexual desire that arises among humans is caused by a perception, but not only a perception of oneself, but of mutual desire, of the perception of the sexual object, and of oneself, which must begin with self-awareness. Nagel uses Romeo and Juliet to express this idea, explaining how Romeo must first notice Juliet in a room because of some physical aspect in which arouses him sexually. At first, until Juliet notices that Romeo has noticed her, he is aroused by an unaroused object, making him come back to his own body. Once the two sense that both are sensing each other's sexual arousal, there is a sense of embodiment not only through one's own reactions, but through another's as well. Romeo senses that Juliet senses that he senses her, therefore making one conscious of their sexuality through the awareness that the other person senses your attraction and arousal in combination of their awareness of your attraction and arousal. To close, Nagel explains that sexual perversion is not the only cause of concern, but also the sexual deficiencies that do not constitute perversions as well, and that perverted sex is better than no sex at all, and that the alternatives to sex must be pretty bad in order for someone to rationally opt for nothing.